The sun was angry that day. It beat down on the alley like a hammer on stone, turned the dirt into powder and the air into something you could almost chew. Rafi pressed his back against the hot brick wall and tried to make himself smaller. 8 years old, barefoot, and hungry, always hungry, he had learned that being small meant being safe. "Get out of here, you dirty rat." A shop owner kicked dust in his direction. Rafi didn't run. He just moved a few steps away, his torn shirt flapping against his thin chest. Running took energy, and energy needed food, and food was something he might find later if he was lucky. The alley was his home, though he shared it with stray dogs and broken boxes. No one wanted to look at him. To the people walking by on the main street, Rafi was invisible. Or worse, he was something to avoid, like stepping in mud. His stomach growled. It had been growling since yesterday. Rafi closed his eyes and dreamed of bread. Warm bread with butter melting on top. Or rice. Even plain rice would taste like heaven right now. But dreams didn't fill bellies, and the sun didn't care if you were hungry. Then he heard it. A cry. Not the usual sound of the alley. Not cats fighting or merchants arguing. This was different. This was a baby crying. Rafi's eyes snapped open. He looked left, then right. The alley was empty except for some garbage and a dented wheelbarrow someone had left behind. But the crying continued, sharp and scared, like a bird caught in a trap. He followed the sound. Around a corner, past a pile of broken crates. Rafi stopped, so suddenly he almost fell over. There, sitting in the dirt, was a baby. But not just any baby. This baby wore clean white clothes that practically glowed against the dusty ground. His skin was soft and pink, not marked by sun and struggle like Rafi's. And on his tiny wrist gleamed a gold bracelet that caught the sunlight and threw it back like a tiny sun. Rafi's heart began to pound. This was wrong. All wrong. Babies like this didn't appear in alleys like this. Babies like this lived in big houses with gates and guards. They had mothers who sang to them and fathers who protected them. The baby's face was red from crying. Tears made tracks down his chubby cheeks. He couldn't be more than 1 year old, maybe less. His little hands reached toward nothing, grasping at air, looking for someone, anyone, to pick him up. Rafi took a step back. This is danger, his mind whispered. This is trouble you don't want. He had seen what happened to street kids who got too close to rich people's things. Blamed for stealing, beaten by guards, thrown in dark places where sunlight never reached. But the baby kept crying. And something inside Rafi, something he thought had died from all the hunger and all the hurt, began to wake up. He remembered, suddenly and painfully, his own mother. She had died when he was 5, but he could still feel her arms around him, still hear her voice singing softly in the dark. She used to tell him, "Rafi, my sweet boy, we may have nothing, but we have kindness. Never lose that." The baby's cries grew weaker, more desperate. Rafi looked around. The alley was still empty. No guards, no parents. Just him and this impossible child who didn't belong here. Walk away, his fear said. This isn't your problem. But his feet moved forward anyway. He knelt down in the dirt, his knees scraping against small stones. The baby's eyes, big and brown and wet with tears, locked onto his face. "Shoo," Rafi whispered, his voice rough for not talking much to anyone. "Shoo, little one, don't cry." He expected the baby to scream louder, to be afraid of him. After all, Rafi knew what he looked like. Dirty face, matted hair, clothes that were more holes than fabric. But the baby didn't scream. Instead, something amazing happened. The baby's crying softened. His little hand reached out, not away from Rafi, but toward him. Those tiny fingers stretched across the space between them, asking for help the only way a baby knows how. Rafi felt something break inside his chest. His own hand trembled as he reached back. When their fingers touched, the baby's hand wrapped around one of Rafi's fingers and held on tight. So tight, as if Rafi was the only solid thing in the world that had suddenly gone wrong. "Where is your mama?" Rafi asked softly. "Where is your papa?" The baby couldn't answer, of course. He just held on and looked at Rafi with those trusting eyes that didn't see a dirty street kid. Those eyes saw someone who might help, someone who might care. And in that moment, Rafi made a choice. He gently scooped the baby into his arms. The child was heavier than he expected, solid and real and warm against his chest. The baby immediately stopped crying and pressed his face against Rafi's shoulder, leaving a wet spot from his tears on the torn shirt. Rafi looked down at the gold bracelet on the baby's wrist. Engraved on it were 2 letters, A.M. His stomach twisted with new fear. This wasn't just any rich baby. Those initials meant something. They meant a family with power, with money, with people who would look for him. But the baby had already wrapped his arms around Rafi's neck, trusting him completely. What have I done? Rafi whispered to himself. The sun blazed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, Rafi heard voices beginning to shout. The baby's weight felt strange in Rafi's arms. Not heavy exactly, but important, like holding something precious that might break if he squeezed too hard. Rafi's mind raced. What was he supposed to do? He couldn't just leave the baby here. Wild dogs sometimes came through this alley, and the sun was getting hotter. The baby's soft skin would burn. But if someone saw him holding this rich child, they would think the worst. They always did. It's okay, Rafi murmured, bouncing gently like he'd seen mothers do in the market. I won't hurt you. I promise. The baby made a small sound, not cry anymore, just a tiny whimper. His fingers clutched Rafi's shirt tighter. That's when Rafi noticed how the baby's lips were dry and cracked. He was thirsty, maybe hungry too. Rafi looked around desperately. He had no water, no food, nothing to give except the safety of his arms. Then his eyes landed on the dented wheelbarrow. An idea sparked his tired mind. Moving carefully so he wouldn't drop the baby, Rafi walked to the wheelbarrow. It was old and rusty, with one wheel that didn't spin quite right. Someone had probably thrown it away because it was broken, just like they'd thrown Rafi away because he had no family. But broken things could still be useful. Rafi gently placed the baby inside the wheelbarrow. He used his own shirt, pulling it off even though the sun immediately attacked his bare shoulders, and folded it into a cushion for the baby to sit on. The baby looked up at him with those big brown eyes, confused but not scared. Want to go for a ride? Rafi asked. Try to smile even though his heart was hammering like a drum. He gripped the wooden handles and began to push. The wheelbarrow squeaked and wobbled, but it moved. And as it moved, something magical happened. The baby giggled. It was a small sound at first, just a bubble of laughter. But as Rafi pushed faster, weaving around the broken crates and garbage piles, the giggling grew louder. The baby's hands clapped together in delight, and his whole face lit up like a lamp. Rafi couldn't help it. He laughed too. When was the last time he had laughed? He couldn't remember. But here, in this dirty alley with this impossible baby, joy had somehow found him. Faster? Rafi asked, grinning now. The baby squealed with happiness. Rafi pushed faster, making the wheelbarrow go in circles and zigzags. The baby bounced and laughed and reached his arms up toward the sky, as if trying to catch the sun itself. For a few perfect minutes, Rafi forgot about hunger. He forgot about fear. He forgot that he was invisible. Right now, to this baby, he was everything. But perfect moments never last. The voices came closer. Search every alley, every corner. Find my son. Rafi's laughter died in his throat. He stopped pushing, and the wheelbarrow rolled to a halt. The baby looked up at him, confused about why the fun had ended. Rafi's hands started shaking. Those were angry voices, scared voices, and they were coming this way. Master Amir, Master Amir, other voices called. That must be the baby's name. Amir. Heavy footsteps echoed off the alley walls. Rafi saw shadows growing longer at the alley entrance, men in uniform, security guard with hard faces and harder sticks. He should run. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to disappear into a maze of backstreets where he knew every hiding spot. But the baby, Amir, was looking at him with complete trust. If Rafi ran, he'd have to leave Amir behind. Alone again, crying again. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. We may have nothing, but we have kindness. Rafi's legs felt like stone. He couldn't move, wouldn't move. Instead, He knelt beside the wheelbarrow and took Amir's small hand in his. "Your papa is coming," he whispered. "Don't be scared." The shadows reached the alley entrance, and then the men appeared. 3 guards, tall and muscular, wearing crisp uniforms. And behind them, a man in an expensive suit that probably cost more than every piece of clothing in this entire alley combined. The man's face was red and sweating. His hair was messy, as if he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes were wild with fear, until they locked onto the baby. "Amir!" The man's voice cracked like breaking glass. He rushed forward, and the guards followed, their hands already reaching for Rafi. "Step away from the child," one guard barked. "Don't move, boy," another shouted. But before they could grab him, the wealthy man held up his hand. "Wait." Everyone froze. The man was staring at the scene before him. His baby son sitting in a rusty wheelbarrow, cushioned by a torn shirt, holding hands with barefoot street kid who looked terrified but hadn't run away. Amir saw his father and smiled, reaching out his arms. But his other hand stayed wrapped around Rafi's finger. The wealthy man's eyes moved from his son to Rafi, then down to makeshift cushion, then to the tracks in the dirt showing where the wheelbarrow had been rolling in playful circles. "Sir, we should secure the child immediately," a guard said. "This boy might have—" "I said wait," the man repeated, his voice softer now, but somehow stronger. He walked forward slowly, like approaching a frightened animal. When he reached the wheelbarrow, he knelt down, getting his expensive suit dirty, and looked directly at Rafi. Up close, Rafi could see that the man's eyes were the same brown as little Amir's, but they were also red from crying. This father had been terrified. "What's your name?" the man asked. Rafi's mouth was dry. His voice came out as barely a whisper. "Rafi, sir. Rafi." The man said it carefully, like the name mattered. "Did you hurt my son?" The question hung in the hot air. All 3 guards tensed, ready to pounce if Rafi said the wrong thing. Little Amir squeezed Rafi's finger tighter and made a happy cooing sound. Rafi looked the wealthy man straight in the eyes, something he'd been taught never to do with rich people. But if he was going to be punished anyway, he might as well tell the truth. "No, sir. I found him crying. He was alone and scared. I just wanted him to stop being afraid." The silence stretched like a rubber band pulled tight, ready to snap. The wealthy man stared at Rafi. The guards waited, hands hovering near their belts. And little Amir just babbled happily, playing with Rafi's finger, as if nothing in the world was wrong. Then the man did something nobody expected. He reached out slowly and touched his son's cheek, checking him over. No bruises, no scratches. The baby was perfectly fine. Actually, he seemed happier than he'd been all day. "How long have you been with him?" the man asked, his voice cracking slightly. Maybe 20 minutes? "I don't know, sir. I don't have a watch." Rafi's legs were shaking so badly he thought he might fall over. "And in those 20 minutes, what did you do?" Rafi swallowed hard. "I picked him up because he was crying. Then I put him in the wheelbarrow so he wouldn't have to sit in the hot dirt. And I pushed him around a little to make him laugh." One of the guards snorted. "A likely story." "Sir, street kids are trained liars. He probably—" "Look at my son's face," the man interrupted, his voice sharp as glass. Everyone looked. Amir was grinning, showing his few tiny teeth. His cheeks were flushed with happiness, not fear, and he refused to let go of Rafi's hand. The wealthy man's eyes filled with tears. "I turned my back for 1 minute," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. 1 minute to take a phone call. My driver left the car door open. Amir crawled out and wandered away while I was distracted. I've been searching for an hour thinking I'd lost him forever. He looked back at Rafi, and now there was something different in his eyes. Something that looked almost like wonder. "You could have taken his bracelet. That gold would feed you for months. You could have left him there and saved yourself from trouble. But you didn't. Why?" Rafi didn't know how to explain it. How could he make this rich man understand that even though he had nothing, no home, no food, no future, he still had the choice to be kind? Because he was scared. Rafi said simply. And nobody should be scared and alone. Not even for a minute. The words hung in the air like birds taking flight. The wealthy man's face crumpled. A tear rolled down his cheek, and he didn't wipe it away. He reached out suddenly and pulled both Amir and Rafi into a hug, an awkward, desperate hug that smashed them all together. "Thank you," the man whispered against Rafi's dirty hair. "Thank you for protecting my son when I couldn't." Rafi didn't know what to do with his arms. He'd never been hugged by a grown man before. It felt strange and warm and overwhelming all at once. When the man finally pulled back, he kept one hand on Rafi's shoulder. "What's your family situation, Rafi? Who takes care of you?" "Nobody, sir. I take care of myself." "Your parents?" "My mama died 3 years ago. I never knew my papa." The wealthy man's jaw tightened. He looked at his son, then back at Rafi, then at the torn shirt cushioning the wheelbarrow. Something was shifting behind his eyes, a decision being made in real time. "Sir," one of the guards said carefully, "we should return Master Amir to the house. And this boy, the police will want to question him, make sure." "No police," the man said firmly. "But, sir—" "I said no." The wealthy man stood up, still holding Amir, who immediately started reaching back toward Rafi and whimpering. "This boy saved my son. He showed more courage and kindness in 20 minutes than most people show in a lifetime." He shifted Amir to one arm and reached into his jacket pocket with his free hand. He pulled out a wallet thick with cash. "Here, take this. It's the least I can—" "No, thank you, sir," Rafi interrupted, surprising himself. Everyone stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "No," the man repeated, confused. Rafi looked at the money. It was more money than he'd ever seen in his life. It could buy food for weeks, maybe months. But something about it felt wrong, like it would erase what had just happened between him and Amir, turn it into just a business deal. "I didn't help your son for money," Rafi said quietly. "I helped him because it was the right thing to do." The wealthy man's eyes went wide. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, the first real smile since he'd arrived. "What's your full name, Rafi?" "Just Rafi, sir. That's all I have." "Well, just Rafi," the man said, and there was a thickness in his voice that sounded like unshed tears. "My name is Khalil Mansour. I own the Mansour hotel chain. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I have a big house with empty rooms and a table with too much food." He paused, adjusting Amir, who was still reaching for Rafi. "But today I learned that none of that matters if you lose what's truly important. And I learned it from a barefoot boy in an alley who had every reason to be selfish but chose kindness instead." Khalil Mansour took a deep breath. "Rafi, I'm not offering you money. I'm offering you a home. Come live with us. Not as a servant, as family. Let me give you the chance someone should have given you long ago. Let me try to repay what you've done, even though I never could fully." Rafi's heart stopped beating. Or maybe it started beating for the first time. He couldn't tell. You want me to live with you? In your house?" "I want you to have a life," Khalil said. "School, food, safety, everything a child deserves. And I think Amir will like having a big brother." At the word brother, little Amir clapped his hands and laughed. The guards looked shocked. One opened his mouth to protest, but Khalil silenced him with a look. Rafi felt dizzy. This morning he'd woken up in this alley, thinking about where to find scraps for breakfast. Now a millionaire was offering him a family. I don't know how to be in a family," Rafi admitted, his voice small. "Neither do I, sometimes," Khalil said with a sad smile. "But maybe we can figure it out together. What do you say?" Rafi looked down at his bare feet, covered in dust, then at his torn pants and sunburned shoulders, then at little Amir, who was reaching for him with both arms now, making impatient sounds. Maybe broken things could be fixed. Maybe thrown away things could find new homes. Maybe invisible boys could be seen. "Yes," Rafi whispered. Then louder. "Yes, sir. I'll come with you." Khalil's face broke into a huge smile. He handed Amir to Rafi, and the baby immediately snuggled into familiar arms. Content at last. "Welcome home, Rafi," Khalil said as they walked out the alley together. The millionaire, the baby, the street kid, and the confused guards. The sun seemed less angry. The dust seemed less choking. And Rafi felt something he hadn't felt in 3 long years. Hope. One crying baby. One impossible moment. 2 lives changed forever. The city would talk about it for weeks. How Khalil Mansour adopted a street orphan. Some would call it crazy. Others would call it beautiful. But Rafi and Khalil and Lil Amir didn't care what anyone called it. They just called it family. Sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest moments of kindness. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to remember that compassion can change the world. Subscribe for more stories that remind us what it means to be human. Drop a comment below telling us about a time when a small act of kindness made a big difference in your life. Let's keep spreading hope, one story at a time.